All right, welcome everyone to this workshop on using OpenRefine in ArchivesSpace. We're led today by Courtney Rookert of Xavier University of Louisiana and Megan Brett of the Jefferson Foundation. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Lead for ArchivesSpace, and as I said, we're joined today by Courtney Rookert and Megan Brett, and also with us is ArchivesSpace Lead Program Manager Christine DeBella. I'm going to drop several links into the chat when I'm done speaking, so be on the lookout for those. The first is going to be a drop to a Google or a link to a Google Drive. There you can find the agenda. In addition to the schedule on the agenda, this document contains valuable post-workshop resources. Knowledge of OpenRefine is not required for this session, but working knowledge of ArchivesSpace is expected. There are no exercises during this session. You don't need to already have access to OpenRefine to participate. We just encourage you to follow along with the instructors. If there are any other follow-up documents that need to be shared, we'll drop those into the Google Drive link that I'm going to share with you in just a second, but the agenda already has lots of really good stuff there. Additionally, this workshop officially kicks off our 2025 annual member forum. We'll be offering 2 virtual workshops this week as part of the forum. There's today's intro to OpenRefine and then a follow-up workshop tomorrow on using OpenRefine for more complex data cleanup. The forum will conclude with our annual in-person meeting in Anaheim, California on August 24th. There's still time to register for both tomorrow's workshop and our annual meeting if you'd like to join us. If you plan to be in Anaheim for SA, we do really hope to see you at the meeting. I'll drop the link to the forum wiki into the chat as well. A post-forum survey is included in your agenda today, and you'll also see that on the wiki link. It would be great if you could complete that survey about today's sessions and all of the sessions that you will attend for the forum. This session is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel and forum wiki soon. You'll notice your microphone and camera are both muted. Please feel free to talk with fellow attendees via the chat, or if you have a question about the content of the session, please post those questions in the Q&A option. We'll be holding questions until allocated time for Q&A, and I will read the question out loud, and then Courtney and Megan can answer that during that time. We do have a fairly large number of people registered for today's training, and we all represent a variety of experiences and skill sets. I am completely new to OpenRefine myself, so keep in mind that all attendees and participants in this webinar are expected to adhere to the ArchivesSpace Code of Conduct, and all attendees should be considerate and respectful in their interactions in the Q&A and the chat. I'll drop another link with all of the other links where you can find our code of conduct as well as our the community's core values. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn things over to Courtney. All right, so Courtney, go ahead and take it away when you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our sort of workshop demonstration today, as I'll just be demonstrating for you all the basics of OpenRefine. And the caveat with that is it's just the basics. We're not going to go into some of the more complex stuff. I'm going to leave that to Megan Brett tomorrow. So this is just going to be the basics, functions that you can easily find within the system. And it's the functions that I used in OpenRefine when I was importing my accession data for my archives into ArchivesSpace. And so that's where I'm coming from, is using OpenRefine to populate an ArchivesSpace instance with completely new data. And my data was very messy. And so OpenRefine was a great tool to get it more consistent so that I could and to get it in the format so that I could accurately import it into ArchivesSpace. As some of you are well aware, ArchivesSpace is very particular, as most systems are, with how data goes in, and you want it to be accurate. So that's how I use it. OpenRefine is an open source. It's free. So if you go to the OpenRefine website, you can download it from there. And then I will start sharing my screen now. As we get started, I just wanted to give a little intro first about how I came to OpenRefine and sort of center us in today. Let's get these. All right. I think we're all set. Let me know if you can't hear me or can't see anything. But one positive to OpenRefine is that because the program is downloaded on your computer, the data remains private on that initial machine. So that's a positive. One negative is that it's difficult to share the data that the projects that you're working with because you would need to export it and then download to another machine. So it's not necessarily a great collaborative tool, but it's really good if it's just you working with your data. And as you will see, the program opens in an internet browser. However, it does not need internet to run. I just wanted to mention that. So, because it's all just run on your computer. One last thing to mention is sort of an intro. There was a new release of OpenRefine this year, so we're in 3.9. So I'm going to try to highlight a couple of new functions that came in the new release for anyone who maybe has used OpenRefine in the past or attended our March forum that we did that was very short. This one's thankfully a little longer. So thank you to everyone who maybe attended our March one and is attending this one, and I'll try to highlight some of the new features as well. So we're going to start fresh today. So to open OpenRefine, once you have downloaded the program from the website, it will appear in, I believe mine are in my program files. I also have a shortcut on my desktop to get to it easily. And to run the application, you hit the diamond. And when OpenRefine opens, it always opens with this command line. And one important thing is this command line window needs to remain open while you are working in the program. You can minimize it so you don't need to see what's going on, what I always do, but it needs to remain open. So if you accidentally close it, but you don't close the web browser, you will have to close the web browser window and then restart the whole thing. But it saves your work, and so that shouldn't be a problem otherwise. But here is OpenRefine. When it opens, I'm going to say open a lot, I realize. Anyway, so this is OpenRefine. Over here on the left, you can create a project, you can open a project. I have a number of projects in here, as you can see. You can import a saved OpenRefine project, maybe from another computer if you have to change machines. We also have language settings over here, and then there's some extensions that you can add. I am not familiar with the extensions. These are just the ones that came with the program. If you really get into data cleanup, then maybe you will use those. But some of the resources we've provided, like the OpenRefine user manual and the community forum, can help you if you want to investigate some of the more complex functions of the program. But today we are going to start from scratch. We're going to create a project. So you can do that from a file on your computer. You can also do a web address. An example of this, as it says up here, is Google data. So if you have an Excel sheet, a Google sheet with data that you want to work with, you can put the URL for that Google sheet in here, and it will import that data for you. One note is ensure that any URL that you're sharing, like a Google Sheet, has the correct permissions so that this OpenRefine can pull the data that you want, just as a note. If you have it set to private, it's not going to be able to make that link. You can also just copy and paste, and you can also link to some sort of database. Again, this is getting a little bit more technical, and so today we're just going to stick with from this computer. We're just going to create our project from there. So let me bring up my file. Here we go. So one of the great new features of the new release is that you can now drag and drop files instead of having to go over here and click choose and then navigate to where you want to end up. I can drag and drop what I want. So we're going to drag this one over here, and then we're going to hit next. It usually takes a little bit, and I believe the more data you have, it'll take a little bit longer. But this is the data that we're going to work with today, and it will show you this preview of whatever data that you pull up. As you can see down here, there's lots of different types of data that you
Yeah, I think we may have just lost Courtney, or at least, Courtney, if you can hear me, we lost your sound.
Excel file. Over
Courtney,
yes.
can you hear me? Okay, your sound cut out for a little while. So if you could go back, basically from where you started to show us the different file types that were available. If you could start from there and go back, we lost you for a little bit.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, just let me know. So just the different file types that you can import: Excel files, JSON, you can just kind of see them here, Mark files, XML files, and RDF, and some other files that I'm not familiar with. But today we're going to stick with simple, and we're just going to stick with Excel, partially because that's what I know how to work with. So over here where it says worksheets to import, if you have an Excel sheet that has multiple tabs, it will show all of the tabs that you can import. So if you want to essentially merge data together, and it's in the same workbook, but separate sheets, that's one way to do it. Or if you just want to work with one, then this is where you select and deselect that. So for this, I'm just going over some of the defaults. It usually starts with parsing the next one line, which that's a good default because usually we all have the first line is a header. One example that this may be different is I know for importing into ArchivesSpace, sometimes the header is multiple lines. So that's just something to be aware of if you want to do that. The one note is if you do parse multiple lines, update the preview, you will see up here that it just sort of meshes the data together. So just be aware of that if you want to parse more than the first line as a column header. I'm going to stick with one because that's what my data is. So then over here, store blank rows, I usually keep that checked because sometimes it's nice to know if there's a blank row and you're not sure what's happening. Store blank columns. This can be helpful if maybe you didn't know you had a blank column. You can always uncheck it if you know you have some blank stuff in there and you don't want to have to deal with it. Those are options. And then store blank cells as nulls. I believe I usually uncheck this just because I'm more used to dealing with blank cells, and nulls are a little bit different, and sometimes they work a little bit different. So I usually uncheck that. One other thing that I want to mention is when you import your project, I always change the date because I want to know which data I'm working with, and also in the way I worked with this data in particular, I did some importing and exporting because I was dealing with data in different ways, and OpenRefine is a little tricky with some things, and I'll mention that as we go along. So I always recommend name your project with a date or a version number so you can keep track of what is your most updated version. And I'll also mention other reasons why that will be useful later on. So now we're going to create our project. The more data you have, the longer it will take. So just give it a moment. That didn't take as long. So now we're ready to go. You now have a project. Step one is done. And then let's make sure I'm where I want to be. All right. So this is the view that you will essentially see. Right now, it is showing our data in records. The one thing I want to cover is the difference between rows and records. A row is just whatever data comes through. So I'll switch this over to rows so we can see. And you did see that there was a change. So right now, row 6 doesn't have any data in it except for this cell over here. And so OpenRefine is smart enough that if you switch it over to records, it believes that this information actually goes with the previous row, which is correct in this instance. So that's the difference between records and rows. Hopefully you don't have data that messy, but if you do, OpenRefine can help you figure out what data goes with what. So while we're sitting here, I'm actually going to put that information in the correct row so that we don't have to worry about it anymore. This is how you can edit a single cell. You just click edit, and then we're going to put in that information. It's row 20, apply, and then I'm going to delete this row. And this was actually something I believe that will potentially come up later, but I'm going to do it now so that otherwise it's going to bother me a little bit, to be honest. So one way you can delete a row is to flag the row. I'm actually going to start right now. And then go up here and we're going to facet by the star. I'm going to then select, I only want the rows that have the star. And I'm not sure, because I'm still in records. And that's another thing. So if you're in records, it's going to show you the record, but I want to look at just the row. So we're going to go back to looking at just the row. This is the kind of the tricky part, but that's why we're going over it more than once. So I want to delete just this row because now it's data that I don't need anymore. So I'm going to go up here to all, and I'm going to see, edit row, remove matching rows. And when it says matching, it's talking about whatever is showing on your screen and matches whatever search you've done or facet you've done. So I want to delete all the starred ones, and it removes it for me. So that's great. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. And now I can just deal with my rows of data. So that's a good way to start. So now we're in a good setup. The other thing that I like to mention in this view is up here it has 211 rows, but it's only showing me 10. I'm a person who likes to see all of the data that I possibly can. So I always hit choose the option so that I can see all of my data, and then I can scroll across and see as much of it as I can so that I understand what's happening. And I like being able to see the big picture as much as possible. So now I think we are right on time, which is great. So now we're going to get into we're pretty close to on time. So some of the initial actions that we suggest when we import a project have to deal with, we're going to apply it to the entire data set, all of the columns. So our first suggestion, and we call it you can call it an action. The system calls everything that we do in here a transformation. So you hear me use transformation as well. So the first transformation we suggest is to trim all of the trailing and leading white spaces. And the way that you do that is you go up to all, you go to edit all columns, trim leading and trailing white space. And then it will give you an option of which columns you want. So if you go to all and then you decide, oh, maybe there's one that I know is clean and I don't need to run it, you can unselect it. But here I want to run it all. And so I'm going to hit OK. And it doesn't seem like anything happened, but it did. So over here is on the left is what we call the history of the transformations. Again, I was going to mention this later, but some of these things I'm going to mention throughout because as they become applicable. So this is the history of the transformations that you've done with your data. As you can see up here, I created, I edited, I starred, and then I removed, and then they have a single line for because each transformation of a column is its own thing. So you can see that most of the columns didn't have any leading or trailing spaces except for descriptive information, which, as you can see, is more data, more words in it. So it was likely that, that's unsurprising that particular column has that. So that's one great thing over here is you can see exactly what you've done. And then, make sure that what you've done is actually happened. And then you can also see, oh, I didn't actually have any trailing white space except for this one column. So we'll go back over to here just to keep us in our base. We also want to collapse any consecutive white space. So we're going to go back over to all, edit all columns, collapse consecutive white space. It's going to ask us again about which columns. We want to do all of the columns. So we'll click OK. And without even having to go to the history, you can see that the number of transformations increases. It was at 20, now it's at 37. So you can also kind of keep track of if things actually happen in that view as well without having to switch back and forth. One other suggestion we have is to replace all smart quotes. OpenRefine does not like smart quotes, and I believe Word uses a lot of smart quotes. So that's one other thing that we suggest right at the beginning. It's in a similar spot. You maybe saw it previously, but we go up to all, edit all columns, replace smart quotes with ASCII or 1-1. We'll do it with all the columns. And now we're racking up our history transformation here. One other thing I suggest is to just sort of skim your data after you import it. And that's because you don't know if you might have a weird character that pops up. Sometimes that happens. I know I've got a couple weird characters in here. Over here. We've got some, for some reason, the apostrophes came in as question marks. I have no idea why. That just sort of happened. And so it's just sort of skim. And then if you see it in one column, it's likely it's in another. So I would then suggest potentially editing the cells. I believe you can do it by column with sort of a find and replace like Excel. So we'll go up here to edit cells, and then we have replace. So, I believe, one second, I forgot to copy the character that I wanted to replace. So copy it first, and then come up here to, let's see. Oh, that's all right. But I can also just edit through the cell. So we'll just edit and make that something that we can actually see, that actually makes more sense. But you can also do replace on various columns as well. And let's see. So one other thing that you can potentially do, and this will likely be more applicable tomorrow when Megan goes more into complex data and working with dates, is that you can set your columns to, right now all of my columns are set to text, but you can set your columns to number, to date, or various other things if that helps more. So how to do that is to go up to whatever column you want to deal with. I'm going to go up to my collection number because those should all be numbers, I hope. You go to edit cells, common transforms, and then we want to put it to a number. And it made them all a number, and it also made them green. And I believe that shows that it's not text, it's something else. So now you know that column is not text. But then when you're doing more complex functions and transforms, you can have it, you'll be able to more easily do that because that information is now a number. All right, now we're going to get into the nitty gritty, the best part of OpenRefine, I believe, which is faceting. I believe it's one of the most useful functions in the entire system, and it's way better than Excel, because I'm sure that some people are thinking this is a lot like Excel, but this is where we're starting to get into why it's even better than Excel in a lot of ways. So faceting. Let's go over to processing status, because that has some good data in it. So to facet by the information in a column, you go up to processing status, facet, and then text facet, because I know it's text. And then over here on the left, it comes up with the facets that are in that column. And essentially, it's how many times particular data shows, and they sort of group it together. And so you can see I have arranged 14 times. I have processed 71 times. That's and then you can sort of get into that and have a better picture of what your data looks like and how consistent it is or is not. You can, one thing I like to do is to look at the count to sort of see, what are my biggest groupings? And then I have a better idea of, okay, I have these smaller groupings down here. Can they actually fit into a bigger grouping? And that's where we start getting into making our data more consistent. Now, in looking at this, I can guess that processed is, if I click on it, then it will only show me processed. And that's when this over here turns orange, and you can see up here that it's visibly showing me 71 matching rows, and it still will tell me the total over. But now I'm only looking at the 71 if I continue scrolling down. Now, if I want to see multiple of the facets, I can go over here. So essentially arranged might be close to processed, so I'm going to include it. So now I'm looking at 85 matching rows that have processed or arranged in the column. And so then at that point, I can potentially start reconciling my data. And actually one easy way to do this is you can actually edit in this view. So I'm going to edit arranged, and I'm going to make it processed. Now I'm going to apply it. And now the data changed over here in the window. It changed over here in the facet, so that everything that I had included before is now that 85 that we were seeing. And now it's only one option, because I'm starting to make my data more consistent. One other thing to include is that if I want to look at everything that does not have processed in the column, then you can exclude it. Oh, no, that's the wrong thing. Excluding is something else. Excluding is if I had this selected and then I included this and then I wanted to exclude processing. That's right. Apologies for that. Some of these words are sort of similar. Okay, so if we're looking at processed and we want to look at everything that does not have processed in the processing status, then we go up to invert. Sorry, they're sort of similar, at least in my mind. So we're going to go up to invert. And now we're looking at everything that does not have processed in the processing status. So the data changed, and then over here in the facet, it changed to this sort of orange color up here, and it's got process crossed out, and that indicates to you, help you understand what you're looking at. Because one of the hardest things sometimes in OpenRefine is remembering what data you're looking at and how you filtered it or faceted it. So that's one way to look at a different view of your data depending on what you want to look at. So we're going to uninvert it, and we're going to unselect. So now we're looking at everything all again. Now, if we want to do a numeric facet, we come over here to collection number. This is the column that we made into our data is now a number in this column, so we can do a numeric facet. So you come up to the arrow of the column you want to deal with, go to facet, and then numeric facet. And it comes up with something that I think if you have data that's, maybe more data you collected in an experiment, this might be a little more helpful. But it is sort of interesting to see that you have 209 numerics, you have a blank, and then a non-numeric. I'm not sure what that non-numeric is. So let's see if we can see what it is. So I unselect, oh, and it's an A, because I did have some data that came in that was sort of placeholders, so I understood where my data came from. And so that's why that's actually not a number. But this little graph thing it's showing you 0 to 370, because I believe that's the highest number I have. If you have data where you don't want to look at all 370 and you only want to look at numbers 100 to 300, then you can move these side to side, and then it will narrow your view. So now you're only looking at data that has, with the column, it's numbers 100 to 300. And you can see up here, it shows you the matching rows to the facet that you're working with out of the total. And if you want to add facets together, that you can do that as well. So if I want to look at, we're looking at collection number 100 to 300, and then I also want to look at what is processed, then I click up here, and now it's shows me I'm using multiple factors to look at my data. And so I have 81 matching rows that are processed and also have the collection number between 100 and 300. So you can get it's kind of fun to play around with your data in that way. But we're going to clear this out so we can continue on. So then if you want, so this is an interesting one. If you want to look at a word facet, if you want to know how many times a word appears in a column, you can do that, which I find very interesting. And you can, again, just another way to look at your data. So I'm going to go up here to title, and I'm going to go to facet and over to customize facets and then word facet. And so over here, it shows me how many times a particular word appears in this column versus our text facet was the entire column. This just looks at individual words. And so if I go up to count, I can see that I have 143 lines that include the word collection. I have 43 that include papers. And then we get into, New Orleans, those most likely go together. And then interestingly enough, I have 7 about doctors or that have doctor in them. So then I can go look and see, okay, so they all have the title doctor. And the nice thing about this particular searching is it ignores that period that usually comes after, titles and such. And so it's just looking at the word, which is especially helpful if your data is messy enough that you don't always have periods if it's inconsistent like that. And so this is an interesting way to sort of look at that and to see just another way to visualize your data and see it. All right, so we're going to go back to looking at all of our data, and now we're going to go over to filtering. And I know I'm running a little behind, but we'll see if we can stay mostly on track. So filtering. We're going to go over to arrangement to look at filtering. So filtering is when you're looking at a particular word or phrase. I'm going to come up here, go to text filter. I'm just going to type in box. And it then comes up with everything that has the word box in it. And it only shows that. So it's very similar to Word, what we just looked at, the customized word faceting, but it's a little different. And if you're just wanting to look at, if you know what you want to look at, I wanted to look at everything that had word box in it. It's a little more direct than the customized word facet. And so you can use that for phrases. So as I can, looking at my data, if I put in half box, it comes up with anything with that particular phrase. Not necessarily those 2 words, but it looks for the whole phrase. Okay, so I'm going to also use this column to look at clusters. This is another great way to make sure your data is consistent. So we're going to come up here and we're going to continue using arrangement. And we're going to go over to edit cells, cluster, and edit. Now there are various options for methods and keying functions. But the basics of what you need to know is to keep the default because that's going to essentially give you what you want. So we're going to hit cluster and see what we come up with. So this essentially shows you the system goes through and finds data that it thinks is similar and groups it together to say, do you want these things? Are these the same? And do you want to make them the same? So this first one shows that there were, the cluster size is 4 because there are 4 different variations that it believes are potentially the same. And it will show you how many rows. So this one has 12, and then there's one of each of these other, there's 1 row in each of these other values. So these appear to be the same, or, arranged in 1 box in 1 folder, arranged one box in folders. And, it's just variations on did the word in get put in enough times, essentially. And so if I know that I want it all to be arranged in one box in folders, I'm going to click the value that I want it to be. So I'm going to click this one. And then it says it's asking you to merge. And I will put this out there because merging can be a little scary. It's not going to merge any of your data. It's essentially just merging the value. So it's all going to become one value. So instead of these 4 different things, they're all going to change so that they're this. So just want to throw that out there because merging is sometimes scary with data. You can see for this next example, it caught one where there was a period and there doesn't need to be a period. I'm going to click on that. And then we're going to go down here to this one. This one is an example. So 9 boxes, and then we have another one that's 9 boxes but not capitalized. And I don't necessarily need to have the word boxes capitalized everywhere, so I'm going to choose this one. And you'll see that it changed this value over here. This value gets populated with whatever the first option is, but because I wanted this other option, I clicked it, and then it will change this data so that I can see what I've chosen. So we're just going to do these couple, and then we're going to merge selected and recluster. And now we only have 3 options that we haven't done. And then you probably saw up over here in the history, the number of transforms, the actions that were taken increased because it conducted our clusters. And so now we have less data. Our data is slowly becoming more consistent with these various functions. And I believe that it is now time for our break, and we're almost on time.
That's pretty good, especially since I had to do introductions. But yeah, we'll go ahead and take our 15-minute break now. So if everyone could come back at 55 minutes after the hour, so 5 minutes before the top of the hour, we'll go ahead and take our break. But thank you, Courtney. That was great. Courtney, are you still there?
Yes.
Is there any way to make your screen a little bit larger?
It's on a big monitor for me.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Is it too small for people?
No, it can be increased in the Zoom window, so it is fine, but it makes it a little bit difficult to see your whole monitor. So I thought maybe that would help, but don't worry about it. It is possible to enlarge it in Zoom window, so we're good.
Okay. Otherwise, I could try zooming in a little. Let's see. Oh, that's really big.
That's really big. Yeah.
Is that too big?
Maybe not. Okay. Maybe not. Yeah.
Okay, so this is 110. Like, would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it is 5 minutes till the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started again. I will mention before I turn things back over to Courtney, keep in mind if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, do drop those in the Q&A whenever they arise. You'll notice that there's already a question that has been asked and answered in the Q&A. In the interest of time, some of the questions may be answered via like typing the answer and answered that way. You can view those questions as well as the responses by looking at the answered section of the Q&A. So there's additional discussion and good content happening there as well. So just keep an eye on that and be sure to drop those questions into the Q&A as you have them. And with that, I will turn things back over to Courtney.
Thank you. All right, so we just finished with clusters, just to reorient everybody. And so that is a lot of the sort of specific data changes. And now I'm going to move into more column editing and focusing on that next. So you can do quite a bit with columns in OpenRefine. We'll get back over to home base, essentially. And we'll start by renaming. And of most of these functions I'm going to do are by column and under, edit column, and I'll walk through all of those. So if we want to rename a column, we come up here to column number, edit column, and I want to rename the column. And I'm just going to rename it collection number, because for me, it's the same thing. And you will see that the column resized when it did that. So if you need to rename a column, I actually use this function quite a bit, because as I was going through my data, I would add on to the column title parenthesis AS in parentheses to show that the data that I had worked with was then ready to be imported into ArchivesSpace for whatever I was going to use it for. So then I could understand where I was in which column, which data I dealt with, and then what other data that I still needed to work with. So that's editing the column title. There is the option to fill down or blank down. I'm going to go over to a different column. Let's do this one. So if you go up to column, edit column, I think it's actually edit cells. Yes, it's edit cells. So sometimes you're editing the cells, sometimes you're editing the column. Because we're dealing more with the cell data here, it's in under edit cells. So you can fill down. And this is an interesting, you can see 195 cells filled. And filling down is interesting because it will take the first data it runs into and fill that down until it runs into different data. And then it will fill it down from there. So this function is potentially most helpful if you want to have a column be all the same data, because otherwise you're going to run into sort of some interesting things. So just a caveat with that, but it is helpful if if potentially you want to add a column or add data that you know is all going to be the same. One example of this for ArchivesSpace import is, do you want to make something public? And if it's all going to be yes, they're all going to be no, then you can fill that all down with the same information. Now, I don't want to keep this because this isn't really accurate. So I'm going to go back over to my history over here, and I'm going to show what about undo and redo. And this is another great function in OpenRefine, is you can see what you've done to your data, and then you can also undo it if you do something you just didn't want to do. And as I didn't really want to fill this down that way, I'm going to go back and click on the last action that I want to have done. So I'm going to click on rename because that's what I wanted to do. As you can see, the data disappeared, like I'd never done that last transform. You can see over here that that last action is now grayed out. And you can also see up here that it shows that I've only done 59 of the 60 actions or transforms of the ones that I had done. And so that's how you can go back if you just don't know what you did. If you put some code in and you're not sure what happened, you can just go back and start. It's essentially like resetting your computer in a way. If your computer's just doing weird stuff, and you're not sure what's happening, you restart your computer. So this is kind of a way to get back to a place where you know what's going on and then try to move forward. So that's how to do that. And we'll also briefly show blinking down. So we'll just use the same column. Go back to edit cells, blink down. And I wanted to show this because I don't do undo and redo a lot, but I wanted to show that this is telling you that if you do this next action that you want to do, it's going to delete the previous action that you undid so that you can't redo it again. So that's just warning you that it's going to overwrite the history that we're showing on the left. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply it. And it only blinked 3 cells. But I guess that's what it wanted to do. And see, again, sometimes I'm not sure what it does. I believe it's because there's data at the top, and then it only blanked some of the rows. So maybe I chose the wrong column for this example, but sometimes that's how it goes. But if I wanted to undo that, again, I would just go back to the one that I wanted to do. But if I then change my mind and realize, oh, I did actually want to do that transformation, you would just click it again. And then it would go back to having done the action that you wanted it to do. So this is a great way to keep track of what you've done, especially if you're trying to do similar things to different data sets. It's a great way to just understand what you've done and keep track of what's happening and what data you have or have not dealt with. It gets a little cumbersome when you are editing a bunch of individual cells because it will track each of these, and then you end up with 400 transforms appear, and then if you ever want to undo anything, you might have to undo things you don't want to because these happen, it's consecutive order. You can't just undo one of them. Like if I wanted to undo 50, I can't do that. It would undo 51 through 60 and then up through 50. So that's a note. And that is one reason I mentioned before why I always date my data, because I'm sometimes exporting and importing because I don't want history that's 400 transforms and then kind of getting lost and not being able to undo when I want. So that is one reason that I personally will export, and I will show you exporting at the end. I will export and then re-import so that I have sort of a history of what I've done with the data in the project. So I'll have multiple sheets for the same data cleanup project. Okay, now we're going to go back over here and we're going to look at joining and splitting, which is potentially very helpful. I'm going to go down to my last row because I do have some examples that I used for this. I've got in my descriptive information, I did do a joining where I joined 2 columns and I joined them by a period. Now, this also sort of gets tricky in this particular form because as you can see, the data in descriptive information has multiple periods. So that can get a little hairy if you're trying to keep track of what happened to things. So if sometimes I would recommend using a different sort of punctuation, and so I will briefly show that. So we've got right here, if we want to split this back into the 2 columns that I had, we'll go up to edit column and we want to split. So by separator, that's the term I was looking for. So by separator. So I want to try separating by period. And I want to split it into, well, let's just leave it blank for no limit and see what happens. I also don't want to remove this column. This is personally, I keep whatever column I'm splitting in case something happens, and then I can see what happened easier, and then decide if it split the way I wanted to. Split it, okay. And we ended up splitting it into multiple columns. So let's see. So it kept the original, and then it added 1, 2. It added a lot because it splits it by every single period that it found. And let's see, where are my, here we go. Here's one that had a lot of periods in it. And here's the one that's giving me 23 columns, which that's not what I wanted. That was way too many. So we're just going to go back and we're going to undo that because that was not helpful. And let's try this again, just in a different way. Let's go to edit column, split. I do still want to split by period, but I only want to do 2 columns because that was originally what I had. So let's try splitting into 2 and see what happens. But we're going to keep this column. And again, it's telling me it's going to overwrite my transform history. And yes, I want to do that. Okay. So then we have our original column here in descriptive information, and then we have the 2 split columns. We have descriptive information 1 and descriptive information 2. And so what it did, because I told it I only wanted 2 columns, it's only split by that first period it found. So everything in this descriptive information 1 was before that first period, and then everything after ended up in descriptive information 2. And that's actually pretty close to what I had originally. But as you can see, there's now we have some leading spaces, but thankfully we know how to get rid of those already. But that's just an example of if you have data together and you want to split it. Now, if I want to join, I'm not going to undo. I'm actually going to see if I can join these back together. So we're going to go to edit column. We're going to go to join. And it will ask you which ones that you want to join together. And it will also let you sort of move them around. So I will just move that down here. I want to join these 2 together. And do I want to separate them by anything? I do. I want to separate them by a period. So I put in the period. I'm not going to replace my nulls with anything. I'm just going to kind of leave them as is. This sometimes gets a little tricky when you're splitting and joining. Sometimes you maybe want to put something in there because you might end up with a period at the end of everything. And well, let's see if I can find some other data to look at that. And then in separator, use for new lines. So if you want to separate into separate lines or tabs, then you can click this and it will do that for you. Write result in selected column. So this is important to know. So right now I have descriptive information 2 is selected, but I actually want the results to go into descriptive information 1. So that one is now selected. If you wanted it in a new column, you could give it a new name. And then you could have a whole new column. But I just want to put it in 1. That's fine for me. And so I also want to delete my joined columns. You don't have to do this, but I'm working with too many columns right now that have similar names. So I'm going to delete them. So we'll hit OK. And you can see that it now added all that information back. It deleted the column I wanted. But it also, I'm not sure if you can see, but I will explain. To see that there is a period, you can see here, I selected the cell, you can see there's a period. And I believe that is because I made that choice about nulls and skipping. I don't think I skipped the blanks. And so that's why there's this period just now just hanging out, which is different than we originally wanted. So let's undo and see if I can fix that really quick. Okay. So just as a note, what I did actually ended up being 2 different transforms. It joined the columns and then it deleted the other column. So we're going to go back and we're going to join these really quick again. Put that there. Period. So let's skip nulls and see if that kind of fixes the problem we were having. And everything else we want to delete joined columns, and we want to put it in the selected column. All right, let's see what that does for us. Here's our warning again, but we are going to apply it anyway. So see, sometimes I have to go through these again to determine what's the best course of action. As you can see, the period, these cells are now blank. There's no period because we skipped them, and that's actually what we wanted. It now looks like the original data we were working with. So that's a great transform and function to know. Okay, moving along. You can move columns around, you can remove them and delete them, you can hide them, you can reorder them. So we're going to look at how we can do that. So if we go up to all, going back to our first column, we're going to all, and then go to edit columns, reorder and remove. This is great because you don't have to, physically move things around. You can just go here and say, okay, I want to actually want to remove description of information 1. I don't need it anymore. I also want to remove custodial history. Let's see. I don't need file anymore because that was a file name. So we'll move that. I want collection number first, and then I want the title, and then so this is just a great way to get your information in the order that you want. And this is also one way that I organized the data I was working with so that it mirrored the ArchivesSpace import file that I was going to paste it into. And so I'm going to hit OK. And then it reordered columns, and now they're all different, but it's more the order that I want to. One of the new functions that you can do is you can now actually resize the columns. You didn't used to be able to do that. It was just the size that it gave you. But now you can do this, which is great for some of us. One note is that as you resize the column, it will cut off the column title. So just be aware of that. But as you can see, it does wrap the cell, the actual data in the cells. It wraps it so that you can see what it is. So that's helpful. But that's a great new thing that you can do. If you don't need to reorganize columns a lot, you just kind of want to move something to the right or the left, you can come up to the column that you want to move, go edit column, and then you can move it. These are the functions that come up. You can move it to the right, to the left, to the end, or to the beginning. Sometimes I move things to the end because I don't need to worry about them, but we'll just move this one to the right one. And it moves it to the right. So sometimes I move things to the end because I don't need to see it, but you can also collapse a column so that if you don't need to worry about it, but you don't want to necessarily move the data to another part of the sheet, you can do that as well. So if we go up to view, then that's where we can do all of this with. You can collapse a column. You can collapse all of the other columns except for the column you're working in. Let's do collapse all to the right just to see what it does. So now I'm only looking at just the 2 columns that I want to deal with. And everything else, all the data is still there to the right, but I just don't have to see it. And so if you really want to focus on particular columns, this is a great way to visually be able to do that without getting bogged down in everything else. If you want to see it, you just click the column that you want to expand. You can also expand them all. If we go back to view, I want to expand all columns to the right. I want to see everything again. And there you go. So you can look at all the data that you potentially want to look at, and it's great. It's great that way. One note that I had that I just want to mention in case I didn't mention is that the resizing of the columns doesn't work great in the Microsoft Edge browser, just as a note. I'm personally working in Chrome, and as you can see, it works fine. So just a note, if that's something you maybe want to do, maybe use a different web browser besides Edge. Now, to add a column is not as easy as you think it should be. I will start with that. But to add a column, you come up here. you go to edit column, and then you can add a column a couple of different ways. You can do it based on this column. So it's essentially going to duplicate whatever column you're looking at. And just because it's showing up, I will mention that the more complex functions you can do are based on this Grell language. Megan will be going over that tomorrow, so we're not going to cover that today. But so please come back tomorrow, and Megan will get to show you how to do all the fancy things. But anyway, to add a column, this is it's essentially going to duplicate the column for you, which is potentially helpful if that's what you want to do. One of the other ways you can add a column is by fetching URLs. I'm not exactly sure how this potentially works. So I invite you all to go research that if that's something that you potentially want to do. I admit that when I needed to add a column in my data for this, I just exported it into Excel and added the column and the data that I needed, and then put it back in OpenRefine. So sometimes I sometimes just go the simpler way instead of having to learn an entire new function. But that's up to the individual of how you want to do that.
Courtney,
Yes.
I just wanted to give you a time warning to let you know it is 2:15.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, just give you, and we do have some questions in the Q&A. So I just wanted to.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. I will, well, I already showed a little bit about flags and stars a little bit earlier, and I did show how to delete a row earlier, so that I will jump quickly to exporting, and then we'll be good to go. Okay. So let's go. One thing about before you export, ensure that you can see all of the rows that you want. If you have facets over here, make sure that they're off, because it's going to export whatever you can see. So to export, you go up here to the right. If you want to export as a project and be able to see your history, that's a good option. I personally stick with Excel, because that's I know that works for me, and with all of the ArchivesSpace import documents, they're all in Excel, and so it's an easy option. I would stay away from comma separated. As you can see, my data has commas everywhere, so I would stay away from it. And then you can investigate some of these other options, but Excel's the easiest. That's the one I recommend. And then it'll just export it into your downloads. And then the way I did that is I would export, and then I pasted it into ArchivesSpace and made this beautiful, beautiful import spreadsheet. One note is that if you have leading zeros, Excel doesn't like them. So I did not figure out how to get the leading zeros from my into ArchivesSpace without having to do some manual work, just as a note. But I also did want to show that it's all in our new database. It's fun to see sort of the data you're working with end up, actually in your database. And we're officially launching our ArchivesSpace this month, which is very exciting with all of our accessions. And so it's an exciting time. And I very much appreciated having OpenRefine to help me do this and figure out how messy our data was. And that's all I have for basics. Thank you, Jessica, for keeping me mostly on time.
Yeah, no, thank you, Courtney. It is no easy feat to basically do a live demo for almost 90 minutes. So that was great. Thank you so much for doing it. That was a whirlwind of spreadsheets, and actually was exciting. I think there were so many coming from OpenRefine. Or as a complete novice, there were so many interesting features there that I think would be helpful. The idea of like clustering and just, yeah, there was a lot there, and I'm really excited for tomorrow to see what else is possible. We do have some questions in the Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and dive into those. We have 5 questions in the Q&A. Please keep in mind, if you have a question for Courtney, do drop that into the Q&A. I'm going to answer those in the order that they are received there. So the first question is there a way to get fill down to use all of the same data instead of changing when it encounters new data?
That's a good question. In my sort of testing, I think if as long as the column is blank otherwise, then it wouldn't start anew. So one way you could sort of see that is by kind of using multiple things that we noticed. If you go to facet, text facet, we'll go to count, so we can see that okay, so we have 98 blank. And then if we want to invert, so now we can see everything that has text in it. So then that could give us an idea of what potentially would fill down. And just as a note, over here on the left, it does tell you the number of the row. So that kind of gives you an idea of, oh, I have text in some of my later rows, but not in rows, 2 through 46. So that can give you an idea of, is your column actually blank or not? And then you could potentially use the fill down more effectively than I did.
Hey, Courtney, can I offer an alternative?
Yes, please.
Hi, everyone. This is Megan. I'm presenting tomorrow. Just pick an empty cell really quick and edit it manually. This is the fun game of trying to do this not on my own computer. So just pick any of in the conservation notes. And if you just click edit the cell, and you'll notice there's apply, but there's apply to all identical cells. So if you like wanted to take all of the blank values in something and make them all that way, you could just, okay, everything that's blank, make it say this. So that's another option. It's not exactly fill down though, so.
And see, I learned something new even when I'm supposed to be the expert. So thank you, Meg.
Wow, that was teamwork. That was great. Awesome. Yeah. Another question, even if I can only see 1,000 rows at a time, are the changes still happening to the entire sheet?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I have not dealt with data that's more than 1,000 lines, particularly in OpenRefine. I would suggest double checking the user manual. I've not read it cover to cover, I admit. So that it's possible the answer is there. But I don't want to give a guess because I don't want to be incorrect. But if it's just showing 1,000, it would seem you could have more than 1,000 in there. Does that sound right, Megan?
I think so, yeah. Show is just how many are on the current screen. So if you toggle down to like 5 or 10 at a time, you just page through the rows.
Oh, but then for exporting, you just have to make sure you have all of them. Okay.
Yeah, just not filtered. So
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the user manual that Courtney referenced, that's the OpenRefine user manual. And at the bottom of your agenda for this session, there's a link to that manual. So be sure to check that out. Victoria asks, can rows be reordered?
I do not believe rows can be reordered. OpenRefine mainly seems to be more dynamic with columns and not necessarily rows. So that's a note. I did forget to show that you can add a row. That is also a new feature. So that's also an option. But Megan, if you know more.
You can sort rows, but you can't manually drag and drop the order. So like you can alphabetize them and be like, I want everything in alphabetical order, but you can't drag and drop the rows the way you can drag and drop the columns.
Interesting. All right. So when you export to Excel, how do you keep the history?
In that case, the history will still be in OpenRefine. It will hang out there. I can open another. So if we look at some of my other projects, I think this one has lots of stuff. I can go back and see everything that I did over here. So exporting to Excel is mainly just to get the data. But if you want to know what you did with the data, then exporting as that OpenRefine project, and then you would have to open it in OpenRefine again to see the history. So it just depends on how you're potentially going to use the data
Do you have
But
to
it,
save? Do you have to save the project in OpenRefine, or it just
I believe
saves?
it automatically just kind of saves as you go along. You
Okay.
don't have to like hit save.
All right. Cool.
And it looks like you can also filter which transforms you do. So if you want to see all the single edits you did or whatnot, you can kind of get in there.
Awesome. And then last question in the Q&A. We do have some time, so if you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A. To get the cleaned up data into ArchivesSpace, would you then just copy it into a bulk import spreadsheet as an example?
Yes, that is what I did. That was the easiest method that I found for me because of just how I was doing, how I was dealing with the data. I also didn't need every single column in the bulk import spreadsheet, and so it was easier for me to do some of that copying and pasting to make sure that I got everything in the correct column. But I also, to help me do that, I also ordered the column in the order of the bulk spreadsheet. I think that's a good potential tip. As you can see this one up here, you can see which ones I have as, ArchivesSpace. You can see I'd started splitting the accession numbers and I have my publish. So I mirrored it with the data I already had, so then I could easily just copy and paste it. So then I didn't have to worry as much about making sure that my header was the right field name for ArchivesSpace. It just worked better for me. But you can find, what works best for you. And Megan will tomorrow be going over how to edit information that's already in ArchivesSpace through exporting and updating the information you already have. So that could also be helpful in kind of seeing that view as well. And that's why we split this into two, because we use it in fairly different ways. And so I think there's value in seeing both.
Yeah, cool. And as a plug for tomorrow's workshop, there is still time to register. So feel free, if you haven't already registered for that one and you are ready to learn more, feel free to go over and register for that when we drop off. I'm catching up on the chat now. We don't have any questions in the Q&A, but feel free to put them in. I'm speaking slowly. We do have a question in the chat. It seems to remove the period at the end when you do that. I'm not sure what that is. Is there a way to make it keep the period?
I believe that was for the splitting and such. Remove the period at the end. That's a good question. Let's see. Let's go back. This is how I figure out anything, is I just try it. So let's see. We want to edit column. We want to split. Does it give us that option? I don't know if it gives us that option, but I will show. I'm not sure. It doesn't appear to with this sort of simple operation. It's possible that getting into the more advanced code, you could ask it to do that, but it doesn't seem to give you that option.
Yeah,
At least that I can see.
I don't think on the split you can leave the period in, but there are ways to add the period back in. So
yeah, a lot of time. It's a good thing there's an undo redo option.
Yes.
There's a lot of yeah, this is
yes,
cool.
it is.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It looks like we're all caught up on the Q&A in the chat. There's a question if tomorrow's session will be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. The recordings for both of these sessions will be available on our YouTube channel as well as our forum wiki. So if you're not able to make it, you can always catch those. You don't need to be registered to get the recording. It will be on our wiki. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow. I was overwhelmed by today, so I have no idea what to expect tomorrow. But thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you to everyone who stuck it out with us until the end. It really, to have a live demo like that go as well as it did, this was great, Courtney. I really do appreciate it. And this is something that I hope that we can all learn from, and maybe, some conversations keep going on the listserv about how people are using this tool, because it does seem really powerful and like something that could work really well with ArchivesSpace. So yeah, thank you all again, and I look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.